Hello and welcome to this transmitter programming tutorial for the E-flite Eratix 3D flat foamy. Today we'll be using this DX6E, but this programming is applicable for all DX radios. Let's get started by selecting a brand new model. Click the scroll wheel and scroll all the way down to System Setup. By clicking on System Setup, we get this warning screen letting us know that by progressing into this menu, our RF deck will be turned off, meaning there'll be no signal being sent out from our transmitter. Click Yes. And here we are at the System Setup menu. Let's go down to Model Select and click. And now we'll scroll down to Add New Model. Create, click. Now we've got a brand new blank model set up on the transmitter. Now let's scroll down to Model Name and we'll name the model. Starting with the first character, I'll name it Eratix. Now that I've got the model name punched in, we'll push the back button twice to take us back to the main screen. Now I'll click the scroll wheel and we'll go down to DR and Expo to set up our dual rates and exponential. When we first enter the DR and Expo screen, we can see the channel aileron is already selected. Let's scroll down to select a switch to control our dual rates. Click where it says On, and then scroll to choose your switch. I'll be using the C switch for my dual rates. So I'll click to lock it in. With the C switch in the 0 position, that'll be my high rates. So I will leave the dual rates at 100%. The manual does recommend an exponential of 30% when on high rates. So I'll go to Expo and I'll add 30%. For the low rates, the manual recommends 70%. So I flip the C switch down to my low rate position, and now I'll lower the rates down to 70. The manual recommends on low rates an exponential of 20. So I will add 20 exponential. And now we can see when we flip our switch back to the high rates, we get 100% dual rates and 30% expo. When we flip down to the 1 position, we've got 70% dual rates and 20% expo, just what the manual calls for. Now we'll scroll up to where it says channel aileron and we'll change to elevator. And we'll set up the exact same parameters for our elevator. Let's scroll down, select the switch. Switch C, lock it in, and then scroll up to Expo and add the 30% Expo for the high rate. Now let's flip the C switch to the low rate position and change the rates down to 70. And Expo for low rate, 20%. Now we have that set, we can see it's working. We'll finally do the same thing on the rudder channel. Now our dual rates and exponential are set up and ready to go. Let's push the back button. And now let's scroll down 1 to throttle cut and click. Scroll over to where it says Inhibit and click. And now select a switch to act as your throttle cut. The H switch is most commonly used as the throttle cut switch, and that's the switch I'll be using. Just by selecting a switch for throttle cut, it automatically sets the throttle cut position to negative 100%, and that will work just fine. We can see that when we flip the throttle cut on, the throttle channel is stuck at negative 100%. It will not adjust per our stick movement. This is very important when out at the field for safety to reduce the chance of an accidental throttle up. When we flip the throttle cut off, we see we regain full control of the throttle channel with the throttle stick. We've got our throttle cut set, our dual rates and exponential locked in, and we've got our model named. This transmitter is now all set up and ready to fly the Eratix. Thank you for joining me in this transmitter tutorial. Happy flying, and we'll see you next time. Hello and welcome to this transmitter programming tutorial for the E-flite Eratix 3D Flat Foamy. Today we'll be programming this NX6 transmitter, but this programming is applicable for all Spektrum NX radios. Let's get started by selecting a new model. We'll click the scroll wheel and scroll all the way down to System Setup. Click Yes, and now scroll down to Model Select. And I'll scroll all the way down to Add New Model and click, and scroll down to Create. Now let's name the model. Scroll down to Model Name, and starting with the first character, I'll name this the Eratix. Once you have the model named, just push the back button twice, and that'll lock it in. Now let's set up the dual rates and exponential. We'll push the back button, taking us back to the home screen. Click the scroll wheel again. That takes us to the function list. And now scroll down to DR and Expo. We can see the aileron channel is already selected. Let's scroll down to Switch to select the switch for our dual rates. I'll be using the C switch for my dual rate switch. The manual calls for the high rates to be at 100% with an exponential of 30%. So we will add 30% expo. And then we'll flip the C switch down to the 1 position, or our low rates, and we'll set the rates to 70%. With an exponential of 20%. And we can see when we flip the switch back to high rates, our rates and expo change accordingly. Now let's do the same for our elevator and rudder channels. We'll scroll up to where it says Channel Aileron, click, and scroll to the right once to select elevator. Scroll down to switch to select your switch. And then add the 30% expo for the high rate. Flip down to the low rate position. Change the rates down to 70%. And add 20% expo. And we can test the switch again to verify that's working as it should. And it is. Now we'll program the rudder channel. Now we've got our dual rates and expo set. Push the back button to take us back to the function list. And now scroll down to throttle cut. Scroll to inhibit and click to select a switch for your throttle cut. The H switch is most commonly used as the throttle cut switch, and that's the switch I'll be using. Just by selecting a switch, it automatically sets the throttle cut position to negative 100%. That's exactly what we want. We can see that with the throttle cut on, when we bump our throttle stick, the throttle channel remains at negative 100%. This is very important for safety when out at the flying field to help prevent the chance of an accidental throttle up. Now our transmitter is programmed and ready to fly the E-flite Eratix. Thank you so much for joining me in this programming tutorial. Hello and welcome to this transmitter programming tutorial for the E-flite Eratix 3D Flat Foamy. Today I'll be programming with this IX14 transmitter, but this programming is applicable for all Spektrum IX radios. Let's start by selecting a new model. I'll click on the orange marker in the top left-hand side of the screen, and then long press to proceed. Click the three orange dots at the top right-hand corner, and then click Add New Model. Default, and Airplane. Create. All right. Here's our model. We can click on it to name it. Now we've got the model named. Go back to Model Utilities, and we'll push the back button again. Here we're on the main screen. Let's set up our dual rates and exponential. Let's go to Model Adjust, and then Dual Rates and Expo. We can see channel aileron is already selected. Now let's select a switch. I'll be using the C switch, but you can use any available switch to control your dual rates. Our high rates, per the manual, should stay at 100% with an added expo of 30%. So we'll add that now. Now we'll flip our rate switch down to our low rate position and set those dual rates to 70% per the manual with a 20% expo. Now we can see when we flip the switch back to high rates, we get our 100% rates with 30% expo, and back down to low rates to see 70% dual rates with 20% expo. And now we'll do the same for our elevator and rudder channels. Starting with the elevator, we'll choose our switch and set the high rates. And we'll keep the high rates at 100%. And add an expo of 30%. And we'll flip the switch down to our low rate position and set our dual rates down to 70 with a 20% expo. I'll verify that's working. It is. And now we'll do the exact same thing for the rudder channel. And we can see that's working as it should. Now let's push the back button back to the Model Adjust screen. Now let's click on Throttle Cut. Select a switch to control your throttle cut. The H switch is most commonly used for throttle cut, and that's the switch that I'll be using. we can see that when we have our throttle cut on, our throttle channel will not respond to our throttle stick. This is very important for safety when out at the flying field to help reduce the chance of an accidental throttle up. With the throttle cut off, we see we retain the throttle control with the stick. All right, our model is named, our dual rates are set up, and our throttle cut is activated. This transmitter is programmed and ready to fly the E-flite Eratix. Thank you so much for joining me in this tutorial. We'll see you next time.